Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Present of Work podcast. Here I am excited to introduce my dear friend, Alicia Lundgren. And today we'll be talking about her relationship with work. Just to give a little bit of a background to you, Alicia, thanks for being willing to speak with us today or speak with me today. I just have a story that you're someone who has been continuously reinventing themselves in terms of the lens of how you relate to your work, making big transitions in your life, and perhaps may have gone through some big transitions, especially in this pandemic, the time during and I don't know, is it post pandemic time now? I'm not really sure,
I don't
but
think we'll ever see. Yeah.
yeah. But just to give you a little context, Alicia, around the present of work and what we're kind of all about here is we see work as an avenue to become more present, to be more present in our lives and what we're doing. Present can also mean a gift,
Absolutely.
and presence can also mean attention and like being here now. So if we can take that into the rest of our conversation, that would be wonderful. So I'd love to just ask you, just start out with exploring your relationship with work. I want to ask you about the transitions that you've made in the pandemic time, or if there's been any major shifts, but maybe if you can just reflect back a little bit on your life more generally and your relationship to work. Have you made any like really big tectonic plate shifts in your relationship to work, or have there been any major inflection points that you might want to share with me now that really stand out to you?
Yeah. So thank you so much, first and foremost, for having me. And I'm really excited for this conversation. So I would say immediately when you ask me my relationships to work, I first think about my identity, right? Because especially in America, we have this belief that you are your job in a way. Every time you meet someone, what's like one of the first questions you ask them? Hey,
What do you
how
do?
are you? How old are you? What do you do? Right? It's like wrapped into our DNA. And yet it's this outside source that's usually completely happenstance. You could get a job just based off of knowing someone, which is also identity, right? It's interesting how it all kind of weaves back into you as a person. And so many people, myself included, believe that what they do is their purpose in life. It's their calling, it's their reason for existence, which is why it's so commonly wrapped back to our identity. So for me, I began working at 12 years old, and I don't think I've stopped since. And the major shifts that I made were, of course, graduating college, knowing that this was it. It begins, and the ride started, and it was no stopping until I retired, was my first thought around work. And the next shift didn't come until I was almost 30, when I realized I don't have to work for someone else. I could change the way that I operate. And I actually quit my job, a very corporate job, to become a yoga instructor. And my identity shifted again into not necessarily being identified with my job, but more as like, who am I and what can I bring into my job? And those are the two major shifts for me. I don't know if you, I think I could stop there for now, and I'll probably add on to that later.
So what I heard is throughout, from university to just under 30, the story was no stopping until retirement. And then you shifted into this who am I and what can I bring into my job. Um, almost like a push versus pull, maybe transition.
Yeah, it was almost like my job was my identity, and then I am my identity. How does that relate to my job? Those were the two shifts, I guess, that I've made so far.
I love
Yeah.
that. Yeah. Can we fast forward into where the pandemic has led you? And I'd love to hear how your relationship to work has changed since the pandemic.
So the pandemic was interesting. It was kind of like this blessing in disguise for me. I was already working from home. So as I said, I became a yoga teacher around the age of 30, which was 4 years ago now. And I was working full time as a yoga instructor, which was basically, even though my mindset shifted and my identity was now focused on me and not my job, I do identify as a yoga instructor, but it wasn't my only identity anymore. I I felt like I was hustling more than ever because even though I had this totally new approach to the way that I worked, I was now working for myself. And entrepreneurs don't get days off. So it was strange for me how that shifted. And it almost made me like, I thought I was going to be taking a step back and realize I took like 12 steps forward. So what happened was that I ended up getting a full-time job with a friend of mine working from home. And this was all pre-pandemic, and I was teaching yoga kind of on the side. So it was like I was running two jobs at once. I was working more than ever, and I was totally burnt out. So burnt out, like physically defeated, a list of ailments that comes from burning out. I was just round the clock working. So the pandemic hit, no more yoga, right? Every single gym that I worked for as a contractor, my own practice, my private clients, stopped, halted. Every single company I worked for went bankrupt. And it was like a sign. So I ended up moving my life across the country and starting a totally different job. I was back in person in a retail environment. And it just shifted again into this hustle culture that I realized wasn't for me. So I stuck it out for a year and I was trying to do things the old way, but the pandemic wouldn't really allow me to. I ended up getting COVID at one point and I was like, why am I running myself ragged for this job that doesn't even need me? I'm homesick. So fast forward now, I actually just started a whole new career again today and I'm approaching it. It's a corporate job, corporate environment, big company, but I'm approaching it as a yoga teacher in so that I know I'm adding value. And as soon as I stop receiving value from this job, it's not for me. There needs to be a mutual benefit there. And that's where I'm at now post pandemic versus I'm just going to give, and become the job instead of having an equal relationship with our job. I think that's where I'm at.
Yeah. Just to give a little context to everyone listening, today is Alicia's first day at her new job that she just began. So congratulations.
Thank you. Crazy timing for this. I love it.
Yeah, so wild, right? Can
Mhm.
we talk a little bit about your transition? Because a lot had to happen, I'm sure, for you to actually get to the point of taking this new role and wanting to make a change. So in the last role that you were having in retail, can you reflect a little bit about like, and you started to, but I'd love for you to go a little bit deeper on what were the drivers for this latest transition?
Yes. So I'm going to go back to when I graduated college. It was 2009, and we're at the recession, right? We're millennials. So everyone our age will understand this. I was literally the only one out of all my friends with a full-time job. And I saw it like this golden opportunity, right? Like I was the shining star. I was the youngest employee to become a manager. I worked my way up the ranks in that company. I was like, success was just the only thing on my mind. Hustle culture, money, success. I was going to be a vice president by the time I was 30. Like I had it all mapped out. And as we know now in our 30s, that absolutely never works out the way that we want it to. I went through like 6 different companies, so many different career changes. You know, fast forward to when I'm 30 and I'm like, oh my God, I'm starting all over again as a yoga instructor with my own business. I can't believe I'm not a vice president. I can't believe I'm not halfway to retirement. Like life just completely changed. But also what changed was my mindset, where before the corporate world was always kind of, it was a game. It was like a chess game. And especially as a woman, I'm not even gonna get into how crazy it can be, but I felt, even though I knew I was a corporate pawn, I was climbing the ladder and I was good at it. I knew how to play the game, right? And then it shifted when I became a yoga instructor and I was hustling and making my own money, my own company, my own LLC, etc. I was now in this struggle mindset of like, if I don't work, I don't collect a paycheck. I don't have PTO. I don't have my own benefits. I don't have this major corporation behind me. So as much of a, I guess, detriment the corporate world can be for so many of us, and it can be very draining, I didn't have that cushion. I didn't have that support. So my mindset was struggle, hustle, or you don't put food on the table, you don't pay your bills. And I had never experienced it in that way, where it was all on me. And it wasn't like I could just clock in and collect a paycheck. Because at the end of the day, really, that's a lot of what corporate America is. You don't really have to do too much on your own to get the business going. So once I had that experience, it was totally different. And it shifted me into this really like low vibration and that burnout where I was constantly looking for my next check. And I stayed in that mindset up until recently when I was working at this job. So I accepted a job to get out of my previous role where I was working from home. I wanted to be back in front of people. I needed to get out of my house. It was just like enough for me with the pandemic. So I was back out in public. And yet, even with the corporate culture that I had again, I was still in struggle mindset. I was still hustling. And every time that there was overtime, I took it. I had a second job. I was working 12-hour days, 7 days a week. It was just never enough, never enough, never enough. And I realized I was also accepting less than what I deserved. So it was kind of not necessarily the job, but the shift that changed me. And it took me almost hitting rock bottom, almost having nothing left in my bank account for me to realize I deserve more and I shouldn't have to struggle to do it. And that's when I started looking for a new job and found this awesome opportunity that I currently now have. I don't know if that really answered your question though, but I think that's what I wanted to say about that. Yeah.
Yeah. I appreciate you going deeper into what was going on for you, through all these different stages to help set up the scene for where you are now, and going beyond just the transition from retail into this new job. So I know you're only like one day into this new job, but yeah, can you tell us a little bit about how you did it, like how you made the transition?
So it first took a lot of difficult conversations with really close friends and family. And for a while, it was me just complaining about work and complaining about money and complaining about bills. And all of them said, "You have a degree. You are really smart. You're a personable person. Why are you accepting this? Why are you accepting this paycheck that you know is beneath you? Not that it was a bad job or a bad company, but I knew I could do better. And on some level I did. And for me, it wasn't necessarily like a big revelation or like a job search, or I mean, I did all of that, but it was kind of going inward and looking at myself and saying, what do you really want? What's most important to you? And why does your job have to mean so much? Like, why do you ascribe so much meaning to the company that writes your paycheck? Because at the end of the day, we're all just trying to survive and make a living. It's this kind of strange concept to me. I often joke around, like, if we never had this industrial revolution, or we didn't have the modern society the way it was, we'd all just be running around like hunting animals and picking berries in loincloths still. And why can't we go back to that? Because that sounds fabulous sometimes. I drive my car and I come home from work and I'm like, why? But here we are. And it took a lot of like coming back to myself and saying, can I actually try and find something better suited for me that gives me more money, more peace of mind, while also satisfying this need for identity that I have, and knowing that I am kind of making a difference in what I do. I am working for a company that I can put my beliefs into, and I enjoy having that time at work. And that's really, I guess, where it started, was within.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and can I ask you a very direct question? You don't have to answer if you don't feel comfortable, but I'm like forming a story here that maybe your last job didn't actually cover your last job or last series of jobs. It sounded like you were working 7 days a week, and it doesn't sound like it may have been covering your needs, your financial needs, because you said your
Barely.
bank account almost got down to nothing.
Barely.
So, barely.
Absolutely.
Okay, so you're living paycheck to paycheck, and then
100%.
like chopping and whittling away at any savings you have in this last constellation of 2 jobs, 7 days a week.
Yes, I did.
Okay.
And for some reason I thought that was normal. That was okay. And that's kind of the yoga teacher in me too, thinking like, I don't need much to survive. It's almost like you have this totally different mentality, and you're wanting to be more of service without feeling like you're owed anything. But the truth is, we are all valuable, and we all have great value that we deserve to be compensated for in multiple myriads of different ways, money being one of them. And that was something that I also had to get over. I am deserving of a paycheck just as much as anybody else.
Wow, there's something I'd love to keep diving in there. Like maybe a story that you've sort of taken on from, there's always like, it sounds like there's really bright sides and really bright learnings from your yoga teacher training and transition, but there's also might be some dark sides as well. Like I hear you say, I want to be, or like I hear a belief, I want to be more of service without being owed anything. Right? I think that's a familiar narrative. It
Yes.
feels familiar to me, and especially in my shift relationship to work, because I've also gone through a transition of starting over and had a lot of like, well, I need to like prove myself, and I don't expect people to pay me right away, right, for the work that I do. I'm just trying things out, and I'm right, and sort of like discounting my own value. So I wonder if that's a little bit about what you're touching on.
Yes.
Maybe.
Yes. And I don't know if it's because we're women or because we're American, but I'm going to say both. I feel women, especially in America, have this belief that, and I don't know if it's our own belief, I think it's society's belief that has been indoctrinated onto us, that and conditioned, right? That's the spiritual word for it. Like, our conditioning is that we're worth less, and that we have to prove ourselves twice as much. Because if we don't, we already know our male counterparts are making more money than us just because of their gender. So in order to make just as much as them, we have to prove ourselves. And to make more, we have to prove ourselves twice as much. And couple that with this polarization of wealth in America, where you have